This week, a hot new bombshell enters the villa.
I'm Shania. I'm a content creator and a manic money spender.
I'm Valerie. I'm a serial entrepreneur and recovering perfectionist. We're here to bring you life and wellness tips, tricks, and hacks from experts
and our personal experiences.
This is the Hot Girls Cry podcast.
We are so excited to have our very first guest on the podcast. You guys know mental health is so important to us, so we had to bring on a therapist.
Not just any therapist, a Latina entrepreneur, podcast host, and YouTuber. Monica Denais is a Latina licensed professional counselor in Dallas, Texas, who specializes in helping ambitious women and entrepreneurs overcome self-doubt and build confidence in both personal and professional aspects. She is a sought-after expert and host of the podcast Cafe with Monica, where she interviews inspiring entrepreneurs and discusses mental health and entrepreneurship topics.
There's so many good takeaways in this episode. We talk about comparison, perfectionism. We really covered so much. Let's get into it.
Welcome back to another episode of Hot Girls Cry. We're so excited to have a guest today. Monica is our very first guest, and we're so excited to have her. But of course, as always, we're going to kick off the episode with our gratitudes. Can you share what you're grateful for today?
Of course. I was ready for this. I was actually thinking about it, and I went to, I'm grateful so much for meeting you because you were one of the first people that I met during my journey. I remember we're sitting in a Mexican restaurant. It was like a happy hour with Dallas Girl Gang. And man, you've gone so far. So I'm just so proud of you. And it was like, man, I'm just so grateful to be here.
Stop. Oh my God. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you.
Oh, I love that.
I'm not equipped for this today. My goodness. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm also grateful for you and both of y'all. My gratitude today is now not going to sound as nice. I was going to say I'm very grateful today for just all the growth in my team, because we're going through a lot of growth in our business right now. And I'm just really grateful to be surrounded by women who I can count on and just really, lean into and trust with my passion and build my business with.
Love that. Always. I'm grateful for our first guest on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. We've done 6 solo episodes now. And whenever I was envisioning the podcast, I was just thinking about honestly having guests on and stuff like that. So this is such a big step for us. And we couldn't ask for a better guest to be our first one. So I'm just really excited.
So let's dive in. We're so excited to have you and just to dive in and talk about mental health and all the things.
Definitely. As this is kind of like a wellness, this is a wellness-based podcast. So we're talking about everything that is for your well-being, and who better to have on than a therapist?
Yes. I was listening to the episode before this, I think your anxiety episode, and I think you were talking about someone. Was that me that you were mentioning, that you're at any time that you, I had posted something, you were like, oh my gosh, this is me?
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, so I do relate to a lot of your content, but the one that I diagnosed myself with was Julianne. Yeah.
We're super similar.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember sending her the post and being like, I feel this. And she was like, I bet you do. And I was like, this is me. She's like, I know. And I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Which is so funny because Julianne was one of the first therapist mentors that I had, her and JC, because I actually worked on their podcast. I was doing the editing, the graphics, amazing, and everything when they first started.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's what I was telling Shania, I have a lot of therapist friends, and for a while that was a really great resource. But it is just amazing, the network of women and just all the work that y'all do, but also just the resources on social media now that we have, and the fact that I was able to find out more about myself and my mental health for free on social media. And then that helped me go to a therapist and basically communicate with actual terminology of okay, this is what I'm struggling with,
I agree. I think, it can get really, for me, it's I love that therapists are showing information, but I also think there's a lot of information, and a lot of information, I can't count how many times I get clients like, I saw this on TikTok. And I'm like, okay, well, before we believe TikTok, let's go ahead. Like, why do we think that we may have ADHD? Or why do we think that we may have OCD? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what is it specifically about this TikTok or this Instagram reel that you saw that felt like, oh, this is me?
No, that's so funny because I'll literally save a post and go into my therapy session and I'll be like, let me pull up this post that I saw and I'll like read it to her. And she's like, well, if it brings you peace to put a label on it, we can put a label on it. But if it's going to give you more anxiety or more stress to put a label on it, let's not put a label on it. And I'm like, no, I want the label, like, because I'm an overachiever. So I'm like, give me the list. I'm like, what can I add to my resume?
Right.
You're-
Overachievers want to understand.
Yeah, and you're a perfectionist, so you want to fix everything. And in order to fix it, you have to know it's there. You need a name.
Yeah. I'm like, just give me the to-do list. I'll do it. Done. By tomorrow. Give me the deadline and I will do it.
You're like, add it to the list so I can knock it off the list, okay?
Yes. No, literally.
Give me the step-by-step plan.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Love that. Love that. So what kind of led you or inspired you? Like, what was kind of the first thing in your life that happened where you were like, maybe I want to be a therapist?
Whew, so many things. I think growing up, I grew up in a very, I wouldn't say small town, but it was predominantly Hispanic. And so in Hispanic culture, we don't talk about mental health. We just say, like, we're not going to talk about that. We kind of make fun of people, like, oh, like that one crazy aunt or that one crazy, or like, oh my God, it's like a gossip thing.
Yeah.
And I would see, like, my grandmother struggled with depression, my cousin struggled with depression, and then I would see what led to that, because they weren't addressing the depression, was addiction. And unfortunately, that led to one of my cousins passing away because he overdosed. He was going through a lot, and I was like, this is what I'm meant to do, because I need someone who... Basically, I just need, like, I want to be what my younger version of myself needed and didn't hear the information.
That is honestly such a beautiful thing to come from such a tragic thing, you know? So that's amazing that that kind of led you into that from such a, like, terrible thing happening in your childhood. And now you get to help so many people and hopefully, like, prevent that same circumstance from possibly happening, especially because I know you do specialize a lot in, like, Latina women and minorities and helping them overcome things, which is amazing. And we need so much more of that, because I know with women, especially being a minority women, like, that's just like two societal double whammies on you, telling you to kind of, like, stay small. So what is, like, something that you would tell a minority woman or a Latina woman if she was just feeling like she was having trouble feeling like she couldn't take up space?
Yeah, I think women in general have trouble taking up space.
Definitely,
right? Like,
definitely.
I don't know if whoever, like, is, like, listening and they just watched the Barbie movie, and, like, basically, you know, what America Ferrera says, like, it's, like, so hard. Like, no matter what you do and try, there's always going to be someone who says something about the thing. Right? Like, you can't be perfect. If you do X, you got to do Y. And it's like, it's an impossible standard to meet. So what I would say to someone who is struggling, feeling like they always have to do everything, always feel like they can't be enough, is that your worth is not defined by the things that you do. Like, your worth is defined by who you are. You are just enough just by who you are. You don't have to do anything. And I think we put a lot of pressure to do a lot of things, Like, I asked my husband the other day, like, if you didn't have, like, your job, what would you be? Like, what would be your purpose? Because I ask myself that existential question all the time, like, what would be my purpose if, like, I can't do what I'm doing now? And I'm like, well, that's just to be, I think I would still help people. I think I would, in some capacity, like, I would still want to support people in some way, like, regardless of what I do. That's, like, my purpose.
Definitely. I love that. I think it's so huge. And no matter what field you're in, even if that's not your profession, is to help people. I think in order to just feel good, you have to kind of get outside of yourself and help people. So I love that, because I feel like we get so wrapped up in our purposes being our jobs and all of that. And it's whenever you tie yourself to that, if that's not going well, then you start to feel like shit. Yeah.
We talk a lot about in business, like, diversify your income. And I mentioned this in another podcast, it's diversify your self-esteem. Because, like, if you only have it in one bucket, like, as soon as that bucket is empty, like, you will have this very hard time to cope, right? That's how you build resilience, where you're tackling all these things. That's why I think when we hear information about mental health, like, go for a walk, and then, like, well, like, that sounds too easy. We think that in order to have this extraordinary transformation, it has to be extremely hard.
Yeah.
I feel like as a business owner, I've gone through that and still go through that all the time, where you become so consumed by your career because we spend so much of our time day in and day out working towards something that it gets really hard. Like, I even think about it sometimes where I am like, who am I outside of my job? Like, it is such a big deal to me, and it's so important to me, like, not for my livelihood, but it is important to my worth, and it is important to my values, and it is something I'm passionate about. But there's times where my therapist has said, like, well, what makes you happy outside of work? And I'm like, I'm not too sure. I'm not really super sure, and it's really sad because I'm like, I don't know. And so even things like a walk, and I'm like, well, how many walks can I go on? Like, geez. And it becomes really, really hard. But I love that you said, like, it doesn't have to be big things that create happiness or worth or value. And I think we do see it because we almost compare it to the big thing, like your career. And it can be multiple streams of things. And I think also, like, as a Latina woman, coming from a background of immigrants, I saw my mom build her whole life of hard and getting through hard. And so I think sometimes we associate, like, and even with your background too, with the way you were brought up, like, you see achieving a certain level of happiness or success, you see it being hard. So then I feel like sometimes we almost don't allow it to be easy because you're like, well, if it's easy, it must not be right. And so then we're, like, almost rejecting it, and we're like, well, no, it has to be hard for it to be correct, And so it's odd because then it's like, well, then what, like, what are we working towards then? Because it should be easy if we want it and enjoy it and love it, but then we're literally constantly telling ourselves, like, no, we can't have it.
Yeah. And I think we basically take for granted the little things, like the little daily things, because we're always kind of wanting, like, the big outcomes, like the big things, right? Like, I think people, like, if people do challenges like 75 Hard, they're doing that because at the end of it, they want to see a huge transformation, right? But what I say is, like, I was literally just talking about this with a client. I'm like, let's make habits that are actually going to last, because at the end of 75 Hard, like, are you going to be able to sustain that? Let's just say, like, you want to go on a vacation. Let's just say, like, literally you can't do the outside workout because you live in, like, the Midwest and it's, like, super cold over there.
Yeah.
Like, how can you sustain that in a way that supports you? And I think that when I said, well, let's try to be more compassionate, they were like, well, I feel like compassion is letting myself off the hook. Like, being too nice to myself.
Yeah, like, they want to give themselves tough love because they think that's the only type of thing that will work for them.
Yeah, and well, they think that compassion is being, like, too nice, and compassion is, like, the total opposite. Compassion is being kind, but being kind to yourself means also being honest with yourself, and that may mean, girl, you gotta check in with yourself. Like, something isn't right. Like, a change needs to happen. That's not being like, oh, poor thing, it's okay, you should rest. Like, yeah, like, there's, like, a balance for that, but you also have to be like, okay, we've rested. Like, now we gotta do something.
That actually leads me into one of my questions that I had, which was, how do you come to terms with not feeling guilty for resting when you do need to rest? Because I feel like for people who do tie up their worth into their work and stuff like that, whenever they give themselves, especially I feel like on days when you're not planning to rest, if the rest hasn't been planned, but you just feel like you really need it. I think, Val, and you've said this a lot too, like, it's almost counterproductive sometimes because you'll take the rest and the whole time you're just beating yourself up for it, or just, like, stressed out because you're resting.
It's like guilty rest where it's like, and then it's at that point, it's like, it's
not even rest. Yeah. Definitely.
Not at all. And there's like 7 types of rest. And part of that is be like, you're not getting mental rest. You're not getting emotional rest. You may be getting physical. Maybe you're not doing your workout that day. Maybe you're taking a nap. And again, we are like super familiar with physical rest, which is like napping and like resting and just like laying down. But also like, are we getting creative rest? Like, if we're constantly like consuming, even if it's like consuming something that we enjoy, like, you know, TikToks or like that also will make us feel like
Drained.
not rested. Yeah.
Super drained, definitely.
I'm so guilty of that. Like on a Sunday afternoon when I'm like have a break from work physically, I'll lay on the couch and I'll spend the whole day on Pinterest planning picnics for the next season. And then I'm like exhausted mentally because I'm like, oh, well, I just actually did like a whole mood board that I would typically do on a work day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why am I so tired?
Right, because you're priming your brain to constantly think about the future. Even when we're looking at visual things like Pinterest. Like Pinterest is very like aspirational, right?
Yeah, love
So
Pinterest.
we're not doing it right, and it's so great. I love it. Like I think there's time to visualize our future, but if we're constantly at the future, like where's the present? Like where are we here? And
I love that.
to go back to your question about like how do we stop feeling guilty? One, we have to stop looking at guilt as something bad. Because it's actually a feeling, just like anger, happiness, joy, like it is a feeling and it doesn't last. You're not always feeling guilty all the time. It just so happens on those circumstances, on those specific events, the guilt comes up. But you have to ask yourself too and remind yourself like, you are human. Like if you weren't human, you could probably run a million miles an hour without, you know, charging your battery and all that. But you're not a robot. You're actually human. So the answer to like not feeling guilt is embracing guilt, you know, because I think a lot of the times we want to avoid things. Like plain and simple, like how do if you go on a YouTube video or a TikTok that grabs your attention is like, how to not do this, what you should be doing, right? And it's like all of those things trigger us to feel like, ooh, I got to do that. Like I'm doing something wrong, right? And people often say like, man, damn if I do, damn if I don't.
Yeah.
You know, so I would say instead of saying like there is a right way to do things, I would say start embracing the negative feelings because they're only temporary.
Yeah.
It's okay to be sad. There's some times where I'm like, I'm sad, but my life is great. But I'm just sad. And I just like, you know what? It's probably just, you know, me. Maybe there was something specific that happened today, but tomorrow's going to be a very different day. I just have to like, you know, I'm going to be sad. So maybe that means laying down for a little bit because my body just says like, you're sad. Let's be sad. But instead, old me would have been like, we're sad, let's go and like deep clean the whole, you know.
Yeah.
Valerie's laughing because she's like, yes, that's it.
I know a deep cleaner.
No, literally. The second I feel any type of anxiety,
Inconvenience, I will deep clean.
not a hair in this house, okay? Not a speck of dust. That will make my brain feel good. I think that's so profound because I feel like whenever you allow yourself to feel guilty or you allow yourself to feel sad or angry and just like let that be, like you take away the guilt from it almost. Because if you feel guilty about feeling guilty, for us, it's this endless cycle where you can just be like, oh, I might not need to be resting right now. I technically need to knock off all these things I need to do. But, you know, whatever, I feel guilty and that's it. Instead of being like, oh, now I feel guilty and now I'm not resting. And then it's like a spiral.
Yeah, and honestly, being honest with yourself, like, is the guilt kind of giving you an indicator that, yeah, you need to do more? Maybe it's like someone's counting on you. Maybe it's like it's been like 4 days since I, you know, unloaded the laundry and folded it. Like, you know, feelings are going to tell us, will give us a direction. So sometimes like that guilt or like that anxiety is going to push you to do something. And sometimes be like, you know what, feeling, you're right. Like I do need to do this thing. Like that's the reason. I get into this trap where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to work out. And I'm like, if I work out, if I book this class at 6:30 a.m., then I have to wake up and I'll start like literally going into my brain. I'm like, what if I just stop ruminating and stop thinking about the plan and literally just do it for 15 minutes. Like if like maybe right now my brain is trying to tell me you're not going to drive to do a 6:15 a.m. class. You probably just need to do it at home workout.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, our track record shows this is probably not going to happen. That's why we're stressed out right now. Like, let's not act like something different is going to happen, because then we're going to wake up tomorrow and feel extra shitty if we don't do that. Whereas we can just, like,
negotiate with ourselves and say, we're going to do something different. But we, like, get a idea and we're like, no, this is the idea. This is the plan. That happened to me in business all the time, where I'm like, this isn't working out, but so-and-so said, and maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. And it's like, girl, maybe it's just not the right strategy. Maybe it's just not the right thing. It's okay.
I think we're constantly consuming a way as well. Like, I think, like, I get that way a lot with morning routines. And, like, I was just telling Shania, like, for tomorrow, I'm like, I really need more hours in the day right now. Like, things are really busy. Like, do I want to go to the gym tomorrow at, like, 5:45 and just, like, create more hours in the day? And, like, in theory, yes, that would solve my problems. In theory, yes, that would create more hours in the day for me. But, like, do I really have the capacity right now to, like, do that? Like, is tomorrow the day that I really should be changing my whole routine when I have a really late shoot tonight and, like, this and that? And I'm just like, is now the time to implement that? Like, I can try it Friday, I could try it next Monday, but, like, is tomorrow the day? Like, or I could just work out at another time, still achieve the same thing, change up the schedule. But it's like, I have it in my head, like, well, I'm a business owner and I have work to do, and so at 5:15 I got to be up. Like, but it's like, for what? Who said? Why? Like, for who? And it's just, like, this made up, like, rules that, like, no, who's tracking this? Like, no one knows, no one cares. And it's like, but I have it in my head, like, no, I have to. And it's like, but why?
And it could be, I have to because I haven't done so, and I'm feeling bad about this. Like, I maybe gave myself this idea this year that I was going to be consistent and create a morning routine. Okay, we gotta get with our present self and say, hey, when we made that decision on January 1st, we were on crack. Like, we would just put too much without knowing that we were going to get X amount of business, that we were going to implement this new thing. And we forget that, like, we make future plans not knowing the circumstances of where those future plans are going to land. I used to be someone, like, if the plan failed, I would be just so overwhelmed. Even if, like, the new plan was exciting and, like, I was feeling happy about it, I was like, no, but this isn't what this is what wasn't what I envisioned. So I lose sight of, like, the actual moment.
That's very much you, I feel like.
Not anymore.
She's fixed.
Yeah, she's fixed. The old me.
The old you.
New Val doesn't do that. New Val's adaptable and flexible and goes with the flow.
I love that. You correct me, Queen. You let me know, okay?
I don't identify with her anymore.
I love that.
Slay. We're so proud. Growth.
Yeah, I try to be, I can see it now. It's really funny because I have a girl on my team who's quite type A, and it's funny because I joke that, like, she's more type A than I have been, and it's funny now that I can see from an objective perspective what it must be like to have worked with me when I was more type A, and I'm like, boy, difficult. And now I'm like, and I can see it, and I'm like, have such a sentiment for it, because I'm like, the stress that she goes through when there's changes and, like, a change in a plan or something comes up last minute, and I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, I just want to hug you because, like, I know the pain you're going through, when it's like, I now know it's okay, but I know what this is doing to you. And, like, it's just funny because, like, and, like, it's not funny, but it is because, like, I look back and I'm like, I know, like, how stressful that is, but now I know it, like, it is okay. Like, it's actually fine. But I was telling my husband, I was like, boy, you had your hands full.
Yeah. How much strain that, like has on relationships and things, like, to, if you're an anxious person, or
took care of me.
Yeah. Like, it's very hard. Like, it's when you start noticing these patterns, it's like, I was like that, damn.
Yeah, I'm like, y'all were patient.
But the fact that you can, like, look back and realize that you've grown so much is so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the last episode where I talked about, like, anxiety and stuff. I'm like, how did who was she?
No, yeah,
but it comes up sometimes.
Yeah, I say it all the time. Like, that's the craziest evolution I've ever witnessed.
And like, it feels like it was overnight too. Like, it really feels like I woke up one day and I'm like, we're not stressed. We're not anxious. Like, it's fine.
Oh, I relate to that because, I mean, something that you said, it was something that I tell clients, and it's like, you got to identify with the person that you want to be. Like, if you keep saying, like, I am X, like, I'm that person.
Yeah.
That's who you're always going to be.
Yeah.
No, it was my thing. It was like, I'm anxious. Like, I'm overachieving. Like, it was my quirky, cute thing. And then now I'm like, I don't want to be that. Because I started to recognize, like, it was contagious. Like, I would work with people and I could tell I was making them anxious. Like,
Anxiety is 100%.
Yeah, and I was making them stressed. And I'm like, that's not nice, you know? And then, like, when I started to meet other people who made me anxious, I'm like, ew, like, get that away from me. Like, I don't want that. And then now I'm like, okay, like, I don't want to be that person, you know? Like, so it is interesting. Like, it feels like it was overnight, but at the same time, like, I went through like 3 years of therapy to get here. So I'm like, it's
Sneaky
not
that way when you see the transformation.
like, all of a sudden I woke up and I'm like healed.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask, as a therapist who, I know you talk a lot about how you yourself are a recovering perfectionist and high functioning anxiety, like, while becoming a therapist and obviously learning about all of these conditions and like mental health, like ways of being and all of that, like, is it, because I feel like for me as a creative, it's really hard to objectively look at my own work. So like for you, is it like easier to work through your own stuff or like harder to see yourself objectively because of what you do for work?
Sometimes I think I have seasons where sometimes I'm like, girl, you got to listen to your own advice. You're not listening to your own advice. Like, you're not listening to your actual thing. And it just depends. Like, I find a new thing that, like, makes me go back to the certain version of myself that I feel like I've healed. And I'm like, okay, you know, we need to take a pause because, like, we're regressing. And so that means that I do have to be very introspective. I think a big thing for me, like, I've always been someone who has been able to help people regardless of my circumstances. And that's why I ended up tattooing resilience on my arm, because I really feel like that has been the biggest thing that has led me to be able to, one, be honest with myself when I am going through something, and also be honest with myself when I'm working with clients and I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe it's someone who I'm like, oh, I think they should be doing this, but it's like, wait. That's their own journey. So yeah, I think it hasn't been hard for me to check in with myself. Maybe there was a time, like you said, like you think about your old version. I'm like, I don't know if that's what, like, I can't even put myself back there because I'm so, like, a totally different person now.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, your brain just can't function that way now because it just doesn't.
Yeah. Like, I can see people who are struggling with it and, like, empathize. And I'm like, oof, that is hard. And you're going to have to find your own way to get out of it. Mm-hmm. But, like, yeah, the other day, like, I remember feeling so anxious about even working out. I remember feeling so anxious about going to a workout class, wearing like a sports bra. Like, I would remember all of these anxiety-inducing situations, and now it's like, anxiety who? Like, who is she? You know? And a little bit was like exposing myself to things. A little bit about is like getting a grip and realizing, like, the things that you say in your head are not fact. Your brain is just trying to protect you. This probably stems from something you've heard growing up.
Yeah.
That you believe to be true. Mm-hmm. We all have core beliefs that we grow up, and sometimes we accept or reject certain things. So, example, if someone has a core belief of people don't like me. Like, let's just say people, like, maybe they were bullied growing up, or they just always felt awkward, always like the quirky person, and they're like, no, you know, people don't like me. If a friend texts you and says, let's hang out, they're going to reject that and say, oh, she only wants to hang out with me because she feels guilty that she hasn't hung out with me for a while. And it's like,
Who are we talking about here?
Is she throwing shots?
Is this fucking play about us?
basically, and we're rejecting, right? Even someone who accepts that will be like, oh yeah, you know, like, she does like me, like, she, like, that makes perfect sense. Or if someone doesn't text you back, let's just say the friend never texted you, you then write the story of like, oh, that's true. It's because they don't like me.
It's manifestation.
Yeah. It's like you're finding the clues and the evidence to make your belief come true.
Yeah.
To be true, because that's the story that makes sense. If all of a sudden people start asking you to hang out, you meet a new friend and all these things happen, you're going to be like, whoa, what are their intentions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense in your story.
Yeah. You look for things that confirm your bias to whatever you believe about yourself, which is why it's so important to tell yourself good things and like things that solidify the direction that you actually want to move in.
Right. And question yourself.
Yeah.
Like you need to question yourself, challenge yourself, because you're not always right.
So sometimes, though.
But like the thing is,
Just curious. When do you know, like, because obviously we've had situations where like we can help each other, because I feel like both of us always want to see the best in people, and then we have the other to be like, no, like they're playing you. But like, when can you sit there and like reflect? Like, how do you know when to reflect and be like, okay, no, I'm not just being like creating my own narrative here. Like, this is actually what's happening, you know?
Yeah.
well, I think too, like if someone, let's say the same example, like that friend who hasn't texted in a while, like sends a text saying that they want to hang out, I would say accept and see, and see, like you'd be like, the story in my head is that they don't really care, they're just doing this, and maybe they don't show up, and maybe they make an excuse. Then you can be like, okay, I need to set a boundary now. I need to actually, because my limit it's capped. I'm like, the evidence that I'm seeing is that this person does one thing, but then switches it off and does another. And so maybe this is a time where I need to evaluate the relationship, because it's not about me. It's about that person not being able to have the capacity to be a good friend.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. We may deserve more. I feel like we always deserve more. But just because we deserve more doesn't mean that that particular person has the capacity to give us more. So then that's what I always say, like a boundary is not about, hey, you cannot come in. Like, hey, like this is a wall. A boundary is, if you continue to do that, I will do this. The boundary is in your control. Mm-hmm. But many people is like, well, I already set a boundary, and they decided to do the opposite. And I was like, okay, now the next step is a consequence. What is the consequence? The consequence might be like they don't have access to you. They're like, they don't get a text. I had someone who had texted me back in March to hang out, and then they never texted me until like now. And again, they might have had something going on. I don't know. But I'm like, you know what? Like I have like friends that I'm like nurturing right now, so I may not be in the space to nurture that. You know, maybe she's ready, but I'm not ready. Mm-hmm. You know, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad about her or what she did, but it is still something like I have to have a limit and a boundary. It maybe in the future, like our schedules will align and things will align, and we can build a friendship. But I think you know when you have seen repeated behavior.
Yeah. Like the facts are there, the cold, hard facts, instead of just the story that you might be telling yourself.
Just like looking at reality.
Yeah, because there's a difference between like, I think that she's just doesn't really like me versus the fact, which is like she planned something for us to do and then never like actually, you know, makes it happen. Mm-hmm. That's a fact.
Yeah.
They don't make it happen, don't make it happen. It doesn't mean that she doesn't like you. Our brains want to create a story to make sense of it, because it's like, well, only people who don't hang out with people, it's like, it's because they don't like them. It's like, no, sometimes life, business, whatever.
Yeah, or they might be telling themselves another story that like people don't like them, and then you know.
Yeah, everybody has their own perception.
Yeah, exactly. About boundaries, coming from two chronic people pleasers, or
boundaryless queens.
We've gotten a lot better. But what are some things that, like tips or just things that you would give someone who really struggles with setting boundaries because they are quote unquote too nice, or because they want to give too much of themselves to make other people happy?
I mean, I would ask, is setting a boundary being mean?
What feels like it sometimes.
It does.
And it can feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. And I like that you said that, because a boundary is feeling uncomfortable. So like
Yeah.
if we can, the very first step is like, okay, just recognizing we feel uncomfortable with boundaries because we think that if we set them, we're being rude, we're being mean, and this person is going to respond in a negative way. Maybe like, I think for me sometimes like I haven't gone into a conflict because I fear that like there's going to be a totally negative reaction. And that's the whole point, right? Like sometimes you don't even know what the reaction is. That reaction is going to be the evidence that tells you what to do next.
Oh my God, that's been me in so many friendships. I'm so scared of setting a boundary because I know that the reaction isn't going to be a positive one, but then I'm like, okay, this is telling me I don't need to be in this situation anymore. I need to get out if someone doesn't respect your boundaries.
It's like validating it already.
Yeah, exactly. So either way, once you set a boundary, it's a win-win whether they accept it or not.
And it'll be uncomfortable. It'll be uncomfortable. But remember, we're not shying away from negative emotions. Uncomfortability is temporary. And after a while, like a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you're going to be like, I was so uncomfortable to like let go of that friendship or like to tell this person that they weren't being the friend that I needed them to be. And like now either the friend, like now the person is doing more to sustain and, you know, equal amounts of time and energy for the relationship, or you're done with that friendship. That friendship was good for a season. You know, we don't have to bash them. It could just be like, hey, they met my needs when they needed.
Yeah.
And now, you know, I have space to like create better friendships that actually align with my now. You know?
And I think it gets easier too, because I've even seen for Shania, like the conversations that used to make you like so stressed and uncomfortable. Now she'll like send a screenshot and be like, how does this sound? And I'm like, you're just going to send that? Like you're just done and ready to go? And like it used to be something that would take like, you know, a couple days of like working it out and like building up the courage. And now it's just like bing, bang, boom, like not happening now. And then same thing for me, like with business, it would be something that I would mull over for like a week and it would make my stomach turn. And like, I'd have to go over the narrative in my head over and over and over. Like, well, what if they say this? What if they say this? And I'd have to have like reassurance for like 3 days before I could send the email and I'd lose sleep over it. And now it's just like an immediate response. Like, no, sorry. Like this is how it works. And gives me zero anxiety and it's just done. And it gets easier. And now it's like, I don't see it as a confrontation or even a potential confrontation. Now it's just like, sorry, this is just the way it is.
Right. And the worst is that, let's just use the same example of friendship, is that you have to mourn a friendship.
Yeah.
You have to grieve a friendship, that you don't have that person as involved as, you know, you used to. Or the worst thing is like you do lose a client. You know, like, I mean, that has happened. And sometimes, like, that feels a lot, but that might come from other reasons why we feel so much that we don't want that to happen. So we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, in the example of, like, losing a client, asking ourselves, like, is it because right now I'm feeling not financially stable? And so I'm, like, even terrified, too. So, like, what is my circumstance right now? Maybe if I'm feeling lonely, I probably might not want to, like, tell this to this friend, because like what if I lose my friend, you know? So it's like we have to kind of check in, where are we now, what are we feeling now, because our feelings will dictate so much how much harder that conflict is going to be.
Kind of goes back to what you're saying about just asking yourself questions.
Yeah, like what are you scared of?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do want to get to some of the questions that we got on our little question box. We can just go back and forth. I think there's 3, so we can just bing, bang, boom.
Bing, bang, boom.
Okay, slay. Well, this one is perfect because it kind of leads from what we were just talking about. But thoughts on hustle culture?
Whew, I was the queen of hustle culture. I feel like I was the girl that was watching Gary Vee and like,
It got us good.
I was in the Gary Vee era, man. No, yeah, but now I see it and I'm like, wow, like this is, I mean, hustle culture tells us that we are not enough, that no matter what we do, we continue to do the grind. I actually had to be honest with this year, I finally felt like, I'm like, why am I trying so hard for the outcome that I want. Like, and I actually have to say, what is the outcome? If the outcome is a peaceful life, feeling calm, the outcome is feeling stable, I already have that. So why do I have to like continue to push harder to keep it? Because I think like, oh, the only way to keep it is to do these 6 things. Example, I started a YouTube channel and I'm like, oh, people kept saying you have to do 2 videos a week, whatever. And I'm like, I did 2 videos a week. And then I'm like, if this is what leads me to growth, and that means I need to continue to do this to maintain that growth, I don't want it, because that means that's a lot more work. Instead, what if I just do what I'm doing now, maybe 1 YouTube video a week, and if that grows my channel, great. If it takes a little longer, also great. The fact of the matter, I do not have control over those things, but I do have control over the output so that I don't feel burnt out and I can actually do it for the long haul versus doing it, having this very like quick fix.
Yeah.
You know?
I love that as a previous / kind of current YouTuber because I feel like it's so hard not to listen to what everyone else says you need to do. And especially like now that social media is so prevalent and almost everyone's businesses are kind of online, you can see what everyone else is doing for their business. So it kind of just, it's hard not to let that get into your own head of what you need to do, which is also, this isn't a listener question, but I definitely wanted to ask you how to kind of combat comparison with social media being so prevalent, because I feel like that's something everyone struggles with.
Right. I think too, because I mean, comparison sometimes will give us feelings of envy, and we have to kind of ask ourselves, do we want their life? Like if we were to just like look at their life, do we want their house? Do we want their car? Do we want their husband? Do we want all like literally everything? If we just got that, do we want it? And it's probably not. It's probably just we want what they represent, right? Maybe it's
what they're
success.
showing.
Yes. And two, one of the things and that I've like I'm so privileged to know because of my clients is that what people show up on, like what you see on Instagram, TikTok is not reality. At all. I will tell you, someone who makes 5 figures has the same problems as someone who makes 7 figures. Or someone who continues to grow and make more money, they have the same problems because they're not addressing the actual root. We think that money is going to solve problems, or like the more that we have, or once we get to this goal, it's going to solve our problems, but it really doesn't. And when we are able to like say, oh, okay, the root is not us continuing to achieve all these things, like that's not the solution. I mean, the solution is to actually enjoy the journey. It's actually to be able to allow ourselves space. If it's so normal to compare, like I think that's what, like how we grow and to do better. But if we're constantly doing that, like when I first started the YouTube channel, I'm like, let me look at all these people and all of these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like so fatigued that I don't even want to do my own things.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And so like, that's when you have to put the limit and say comparison isn't actually allowing us to take action. It's actually like debilitating us to take action.
Yeah, definitely been there. Definitely.
Yeah, that's so true. And like as somebody who does social media, I'm like to actually keep up with it all is like so much.
Never ending hamster wheel.
Yeah. I unfollowed all of my therapist friends and I told them like, hey, I'm just like unfollowing everybody because I don't need that. Like I want you to, and that doesn't mean that I'm not happy for you. I want you to grow in your own space.
Yeah.
I need to grow in my own space, in my own little garden. You're over there in your own garden.
Yeah.
And I just need the space to grow because I need different things to flourish. And when I keep seeing that you're flourishing and I'm wanting to take those things, but I can't do that because I have to water my own plants. You know?
Yeah. You wish them well, but it's not serving you to watch them doing well.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. There's a influencer that I follow who like, I always tell Shania, like I love her so much that I hate her because she's just so incredibly successful. And like every time she accomplishes something, I'm like, okay, now I got to do it. And it's just so unhealthy, but it's like, I love her and I'm so happy for her. But at the same time, I'm like, damn it. Like, can you chill? Like, and she's amazing, but she's even said like herself, like social media is this unique part of our society where like we are now in this era where we have to do announceable things, where it's like we don't just do things that further our career. We don't just do things that improve ourselves. We do things for the sake of being able to announce them. And we add them to our like checklist of like, oh, well, I'm going to now publish a book. And it's like, I've never had any sort of interest in publishing a book, but then I see all these other entrepreneurs publishing books and I'm like, well, now I got to publish a book. Like, damn it.
Yeah.
And it's like, but for what? Like, I have zero interest, but it's like on the totem pole now.
Oh yeah, I wanted to be like a speaker and speak in conferences and do all of these things, and I'm like, for what? Like,
yeah.
what?
It's like, do I want that?
Like, do I really want that? Like, it'd be nice. Now it's like, it could be nice. Like, it's nice. Like, if the opportunity presents itself, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to kill myself to do those things.
Yeah.
Because the more that you kind of question, why do I want this? Like, why do I actually want
Yeah.
this? Like, what if I had this today? How would my life look different?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would. Like we talked earlier about wanting a house. I had to actually reel it in because I'm like, the reality is getting a house right now, the industry is hard. So, like, if I got a house now, how would my life look different? Have more space?
Yeah.
What would that space give me?
One of our other questions was, what are your thoughts about constantly having an endless to-do list and feeling the need to stay busy?
Mm-hmm. The endless to-do list, gosh. I think it's fine to have lists. I think lists are helpful grounding tools if we have a lot of things in our head to use them. But we have to separate our long, endless to-do list with our realistic list, like our top 3. Like, you got to pick one thing or 3 things, and that doesn't mean you only do the 1 or 2 or the 1 or 3 things. It just means that you are not. You're giving yourself like your capacity. Like, okay, this is like the goal, and if anything more that we want to do, we can continue doing. But unless we stop that habit, like, you're going to continue to feel like your list controls you. So you have to control it. So look at the list and actually say, like, what are those 3 things? Or is that one thing that I actually have to do before I add more? And I think, too, as, like, if you are anxious or a chronic perfectionist, you will constantly want to add more to that list. And I would say to combat that is, if you write a list, that's the only thing that's going to be on that list. If more comes, you wait till the next day to see if that is still something that you want to do, or, because the more that we put, we're saying what we're doing is never enough. That's the endless cycle, because we keep adding more and more, and we're basically giving our brain, priming it to say, oh, okay, this list isn't enough. Like, you need to do more. Mm-hmm. You do more and more and more.
And I feel like it's so important to celebrate whenever you do check something off your to-do list. And if you're constantly adding more and more things on it, I feel like you're not really giving yourself like the celebration for tackling the things that you already did do. And then, like you said, you feel like you're not enough.
Right. Mm-hmm. And start like a clean slate. Like, stop, judging yourself for the version that yesterday didn't get do her to-do list, or the version that procrastinated a while ago. Like, just like meet yourself where you're at.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the times we carry our past experiences, like, oh, that one time, like, I didn't show up, or the one time that I'm always the identity, like, oh, I'm always a procrastinator, I'm always late, and be like, that's not okay. So what choice are we making today? If the choice is, I don't want my endless to-do list to control me, then we control it. If you're already writing an impossible list, you're already setting the tone.
Yeah.
The tone is going to be chaotic.
Definitely. I think that's so helpful too, because like it just touches on the hustle culture and just the never ending cycle and stuff like that. And I feel like in order for you to ever feel good in your life, you definitely have to be in control.
And a list is something that you write. Like, no one's actually...
You're doing it to yourself,
You are
babes.
literally in control.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm extremely passionate about my lists. Like, I have a list every single day, and I am like, I have a method to the madness, and like my lists get done, and like I just love my list. But there are days where like I'll start my day a bit later and I'll feel a bit shit about it, and I'm like, okay, we have so much to do today, and like those are my procrastination days where I'm like, okay, we need to like hop to it. So sometimes to give myself like a little like pep talk and like motivational, put things I've already done. I'm like, shower, check, brush teeth, check. And I'm like, go me.
The dopamine release when you check something off is unreal.
And I'm like, wow, like, look at the 5 things I've already done. Like, go potty.
I love that.
Like a positive affirmation. Like,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm like, I am so awesome. I've already done like a fourth of my list.
That's me every morning, girl. Every morning. The last question is best ways to regulate your nervous system.
Well, we talked a lot about it during this episode, and that is to not avoid your feelings. Like, just do not avoid them. Like, it's gonna be uncomfortable. So if you're feeling angry, you want to tie that to an action that can help release that anger. Now, choose the action wisely. I mean, if you've got a lot of pent up energy and anger, like, I mean, you do need to like sign up for like a kickboxing class, or like you need to get a rage room, and that's okay because that's helpful. That's, I mean, in high school, I knew a lot of girls who were just so angry and they would get on fights, and I'm like, man, like, what's happening at home? Because like, you are angry, and you're like releasing this, and you're not regulating, and you're like hitting people and things like that. And it's like, you really need to release those emotions, whether it's anxiety. Sometimes for high functioning people, we tend to use fight as our response. We tend to like push. For people who have like generalized anxiety, they tend to use flight, which is avoidance. They tend to be like, nuh-uh, I'm not even gonna, I'm like gonna, like if a certain thing is making me anxious, I'm just gonna avoid the shit out of it, and I'm not gonna do it. So we actually have to choose to do the thing that will actually help us accomplish whatever it is that we're feeling anxious for, but to a healthy degree, right? Because if not, then we're just leaning towards high functioning. We're just, it's just like, no one knows we're actually super stressed out because we're constantly pushing, but we're pushing to an extreme capacity that isn't actually our baseline. It's actually just like our, like, over the baseline.
Yeah, I feel like that's so real, especially in today's society where I feel like all of our nervous systems are just like on high alert all the time because we're just getting all of these like dopamine, and we're never just like chilling out either.
And we're all over caffeinating as well.
And we don't even, half the time, we don't even know what we're feeling. We don't even know like the emotions we're feeling because we're distracting ourselves, avoiding them.
Exactly. Like, we'll use TikTok or anything to like scroll. And I think other ways to do, like, if you have ice, if you have ice in your house, like, hold a piece of ice. Hold a piece of ice. That will distract you from whether you're having a panic attack. It'll just help you reset. Yeah, cold shower. I mean, people call it like cold plunging. Like, that is something that will help reset your nervous system. Especially, I mean, I encourage you to do it in the morning, when you are just getting up, like you are you have a clean slate. Other things too. And Valerie, you might hate me for this, but like, eat before you drink your coffee.
Oh my God.
I do that now.
Okay.
Except for today.
Since when?
I do that now every day except for today.
That's okay. Like, hey, it's okay. If it's 6 out of the 7 days, we're
Yeah,
giving, like,
6 out of the 7 days. 5 out of the 7, okay?
that's called balance.
4 out of the 7, okay?
I'm so proud of you. I'm just, thinking of our last sleepover. That's all.
We ate with
You
the
make
coffee.
No, slay. She's living her best Delulu life.
It's okay.
I don't identify with her.
But if we don't eat and we just have coffee, like, it's just going to amp up our cortisol level, which is our stress hormone, and it's going to make for a anxious start to our day,
Definitely. I feel that. If I drink coffee first thing, I'm just like, absolutely, I can't even pick a thought. Like, I'm just too anxious to even start a thought. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like your brain is malfunctioning.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to coffee, so I've really had to train myself to eat a little bit of something, because I was also someone that kept saying, like, I just don't like eating breakfast. And it's like, well, how can we be someone who likes eating breakfast? So I had to, like, experiment with different foods and easy foods, because for me too, breakfast feels like a chore. Like, it feels like, it's one more thing I got to do in my day,
Yep.
One more thing I got to do in my morning routine. So I just made easy breakfast meals that I could, be able to eat and then have my coffee. Like, I'm not saying no to coffee, because that's self-care. That's for me, that's self-care. I need to have my coffee. But at least be able to know that I made a good decision by not priming myself with stress and allowing myself that time to regulate.
For me, it's almost like the treat after I've like done my whole morning routine and then made myself breakfast. Like the coffee is getting me through it all. I'm like, I know that's on the other side of all of this. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was so nice. And you're just such a wealth of knowledge. And we could not have asked for a better first guest, honestly.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this has been so fun.
Slay.
Thanks for listening to the Hot Girls Cry podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, show some love and support with a rating and review.
Or keep the conversation going over on our socials.
TTYL.